Hi, and welcome to another edition of Rabbi K's Cuts, visual blasts of wisdom on the weekly Torah portion. This week's portion is Parshat Vayeira. One of the interesting stories that takes place is the destruction of the towns of Sodom and Amorah. Now, Lot, who was Abraham's nephew, he was a resident of these towns, and yet he was saved. And the question is, why? So, besides, of course, the obvious connection that he had to Abraham, the commentaries explain another reason. They say that when Abraham had been traveling south with his family into Egypt, the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, had wanted to abduct Sarah, or would have wanted to abduct Sarah, Abraham's wife. And therefore, they concocted a story that Sarah was actually Abraham's sister. As a result, the Pharaoh would not be as compelled to kill Abraham in order to take his wife, Sarah. And Lot went along with this plan. The commentaries explain that Lot's willingness not to spill the beans, so to speak, and disclose Sarah's true identity was the reward, was the merit that allowed Lot to survive the destruction of his town years later. The question is, didn't Lot have other merits? For example, we see in this very graphic story in the Torah, which they certainly don't teach you about in Hebrew school, that Lot refuses to hand over his guests, these angels, disguised as people, these guests to the angry mobs that were demanding their release. Isn't that itself a great act of kindness? Shouldn't that have allowed Lot to survive? The answer, which was given beautifully by Rabbi Levi Burnham, Rabbi Ozzy's brother, and which is included in this week's MJ Express, is as follows. The value of any mitzvah, of any action, according to the Torah, is commensurate with its difficulty. For Lot, who grew up in Abraham's enclave, who grew up with Abraham's Weltanschauung, acting kindly to guests was second nature. We know Abraham was the paragon of hospitality. And therefore, for Lot, who grew up around such ideals, the fact that he refused to betray his guests, to throw them to the wolves, so to speak, was not really that great of a triumph. However, we also know that Lot was someone who was attracted greatly to material wealth. The whole reason that he chose Sodom and Amorah as his residence, as his place of living, was because the Torah tells us it offered green pastures, places for him to raise his cattle, to raise his livestock, to be able to live a wealthy existence. Therefore, had Lot disclosed Sarah's true identity to the Pharaoh of Egypt, he would have been ingratiating himself into Egyptian society. He would likely have been securing for himself incredible riches. The fact that he refused to do that, that was a tremendous act of kindness. That was a tremendous act of power and of sacrifice on Lot's part. And that is the act that merited him salvation when his town was being destroyed. Friends, when we think in life of finding mitzvahs to do, of finding good things that we're trying to accomplish, very often we gravitate naturally towards that which already is part of who we are, already is second nature to us. Yet what the Torah is teaching us is that of much greater value is those things that are difficult for us. For one person, it might be the ability to sit and study Torah, and he has to push himself to do that. For another, it might be to smile and act kindly towards a specific individual. And yet what the Torah is teaching us is when we push ourselves, when we sacrifice, when we endure difficulty to accomplish something meaningful, that gives that action so much greater value. And that's ultimately what the Torah is really looking for. Shabbat Shalom. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Until next time.